Hey listeners, Mallory Willsea here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. I get the privilege of working alongside all of our creators at Enrollify, but I wanted to take just a quick moment to tell you about why I love the Talking Tactics podcast hosted by Diana Kibbolds. Every other Tuesday, Day drops a new episode where she focuses on a single tactic that moved the needle on any enrollment metric, from inquiries and booth visitors to apps completed and deposits, even registrations, you name it. The catch? The tactic had to be done with limited resources, either by a single person or a small but mighty team, or limited time, or maybe without a lot of money. The podcast format is fun and engaging, and it's just different from the more traditional 60-minute interview style shows. If you work in enrollment management or marketing, be sure to give Day's show a listen. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Talking Tactics wherever you get your podcasts.
I think it's like not only is the incentive structure off with maybe a head of admissions that's just tasked with a volume goal, but the incentive is off from the market, meaning that people almost want to pay a higher sticker price so long as that's not actually the price that they're paying.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your Monday morning energizer covering insights and trends in higher ed marketing and enrollment. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing over 15 years of ed tech and marketing expertise to your earbuds.
And I'm Seth Odell, joining the Pulse with my own adventures from leading marketing at top universities to founding Kanahoma, one of the industry's fastest growing digital marketing agencies.
Each week, we bring you the kind of insider insights you typically only find over cocktails with your pals at a conference.
It's fast, it's fun, and it's designed for you, the busy higher ed professional.
You're not just listening to another podcast.
You're checking the pulse of higher education.
Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. And we're back with the Higher Ed Pulse. Hey, Seth.
Hey, Mallory, how are you?
I am doing great because I am on a little sugar high right now, full disclosure.
Fair enough.
Some listeners may know this. My parents are maple producers.
Yes.
Yes, and I was just recently at the maple farm, so I came home with fresh syrup. For the uninitiated, this is maple syrup season. It is often associated with the fall, right? We got our maple leaves and stuff, around Thanksgiving time. This right now is the tail end of maple syrup season, and my family has been producing syrup for 100 years.
Wow, that's crazy.
We need to look, I gotta put my marketing hat on and on the website or something, tier out the 100th year run, right? There's something to this, but Seth, I know I'm heavily biased, but it's the best maple syrup on this planet.
No, I can second it. I don't know, you actually gave me a bottle 10 years ago, and I can attest it is fantastic. And in fact, can you still order on the website?
woodsmaple.com. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes.
You will put in the show notes because I will buy one listener a bottle and ship it to them. I commit now. I don't know. What should we do? How do I pick something? I'll pick it at random. If you comment on a LinkedIn post for this episode, I will pick one person at random and I will ship you Woods maple syrup. I'm in. Well, I'll ship myself some too, though, when I do it.
100th year run.
Yeah, got to celebrate that. It's amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, I love that. That is so generous, and I'll double the offer. So now 2 listeners can get their own Woods maple products. Oh man, and if anyone ever wants to deep dive on maple syrup stuff, I'm your girl.
I dare say that's a sweet offer.
Oh, aren't you so funny?
Sorry, that's the dad jokes in the
I had lived in Vermont for quite some time, and so I had a bunch of my Vermonter friends at my wedding. And you might recall this, we gave all of our guests little bottles of maple syrup. and my brilliant Vermont friends walked their way over to the ice cream bar, got a scoop of ice cream, and dumped that maple syrup right on top of it.
Yeah, I actually remember 100%. That was awesome.
All right. Well, Seth, we're not here just to talk about the delicious golden maple syrup, but we're here this week to talk about growing discount rates, specifically at private institutions. Talk to me about this.
We always talk about, when we do the podcast, we want to share things that we're hearing on the streets, when we're talking to meet with folks. So, I recently got back from a conference. It was a smaller conference for the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, CCCU. It's called the Multi-Academic Conference. I had a chance to speak with one of our partners there. Really good conference, great sessions, and good conversations. Overall, the big thing I would say there was one presentation in particular that kind of stole the show. Bethel University each year puts out research related to discount rates for private faith-based institutions. And so folks that are part of CCCU can share their discount rates, their admissions data, and then Bethel will consolidate that and share it. They share with folks that contribute everything. For the rest of us, like myself, they share more broadly and publicly trends data that doesn't necessarily identify specific institutions. So their next report is not out yet, should be out soon. And so we'll link to it in the show notes if and when it does get released. But what I can share is some really interesting things that came out of it. And it was the talk of the conference for the folks that I engaged with, which was that, for consecutive years now, and it's really becoming an increasing trend, private institutions, in this case, faith-based institutions, are increasing their discount rates year over year. And to a point that like a subset of the institutions that contributed data were actually losing money. And by subset, I mean like more than 10% of the institutions. So like a lot of institutions that are doing a discount rate significantly are doing so to the point that they're not necessarily financially viable in that given year. And I just think that, we know that private institutions discount. We know that it's a big factor, that the sticker price is not what almost anybody ever pays. And we know that that's happening. But to me, it was just very interesting how far it's getting. And there's a question of like, are we on a one-way road here, or can we turn this thing around? I think that there's institutions that are financially challenged yet are continuing to increasingly discount, means that institutions are willing to discount at a loss to maintain student population. And that really is an interesting thing to me. That's sort of like the last line of defense before shrinking. And I don't know if that's like leadership wanting to tell the board, hey, we're flat year over year, or if it's people wanting to celebrate increased applications. Because we go out and we still see a lot of private institutions touting, record applications, maybe some of it's from direct admissions, record enrollments, but now maybe some of that is from increased record discounting. And it just highlighted to me that the role of discounting for private institutions may be unsustainable and may be heading towards a cliff. And I don't know if that's true or not. That's not what was presented, to be clear. The research was very quant-based. It was really interesting. Read it when it comes out. But it was the conversations that were sparked from that was what got me. It was the hallway conversations of, one, do we even need to discount this much? Are we at a point where private education is actually potentially more affordable than it used to be, which is what some of the data is showing? And two, are institutions discounting to the point that they're financially not viable just to hide the fact that they're actually shrinking? And it's the only way to keep their population flat is to give away more money this year than last year. And so, discounting is just one of those. We talked about direct admissions recently, but other things. I just feel like that was such an interesting conversation. Obviously, it doesn't impact the full market. This is really a private institution conversation as far as the rapid and record discounting. But the net to me is institutions are discounting at a record rate, perhaps farther than they need to. And for some of them, it may be hiding the fact that they really should be shrinking. And the only reason they're not is because they're discounting at a rate that makes them lose money. And so that was the takeaway. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I know you come from the private space as well back in the day. And so it just really kind of shook me as this may be a bigger conversation. And I haven't heard it discussed on a large platform, at least not yet.
After I stopped working at my alma mater, a couple years later, I recall reading some articles where the president came out. So this would have been probably in the 2013-14 years. I might be off, but that's probably about where it was. President came out and actually, saw the enrollment cliff looming, saw some early trend signs in the college's enrollment that things were on the decline, and put forth a proposal to mindfully decrease the overall enrollment of the campus and do it intentionally, do it over the course of a number of years, and kind of reset and resize the right size for that school based off of all of the resources that it takes to run a very residential private liberal arts institution. He got skewered. absolutely skewered for putting that forward. And I remember reading it and being like, no, this is the right plan. Like just growth for growth's sake to make the board happy or whatnot. No, this is how you combat the market forces and the things that are coming down the pipeline. And you do it systematically and thoughtfully and probably wind up keeping your doors open for a whole lot longer than you otherwise would have if you just year over year start incurring all of this debt. Notre Dame College came out a couple weeks ago, this is in Ohio, that they're closing. This is a 100-year-old institution that has been struggling with falling enrollment, rising costs, and a lot of debt. And I think so many private faith-based, especially liberal arts institutions, are sitting in that same space right now. But like, are leaders just sticking their head in the sand or, and hoping, oh, maybe next year will be better. Maybe direct admissions will be the silver bullet. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it may be nuanced, but I think one of the issues is incentive structure. For the most part, across the board, heads of enrollment and admissions that I know are tasked with headcount goals. They're not tasked with revenue goals. And so the CFO has the revenue goal. So it's like, well, of course, admissions and enrollment is going to discount. I mean, how many times have you seen an institution that's trailing behind increase discounts later into the season because they're not where they want to be to try to make up for it? And so, the reality is, though, that like those discounts have financial impacts on an institution. And so, if you give someone the ability to discount to hit their number, of course, they're going to do that. And I think that's one piece that needs to be changed. I think the other challenge we have, and maybe you can hit on this because I know you have a lot of experience in like pricing, is that I think, unfortunately, the market likes it. Which I mean by that is I think the market likes to get a big discount on a high sticker price. And I've even experienced this in my past. When I was marketing low-cost programs, it felt like it was sometimes harder to sell a low-cost program than it was to sell a high-cost one, even though, the low-cost program maybe was a higher quality product, because the market has some connotations and, considerations when they evaluate something at a certain price point. And so I think it's like not only is the incentive structure off with maybe a head of admissions that's just tasked with a volume goal, but the incentive is off from the market, meaning that people almost want to pay a higher sticker price so long as that's not actually the price that they're paying.
Hey everyone, it's Mallory. I'm hosting the Engage Summit this summer in Raleigh, North Carolina. The theme of the conference is AI Got You. We're not just talking theories. This conference is your guide to understanding and applying AI at your institution. By the end, you won't just get AI. You'll be ready to lead your campus through an AI transformation. It's for everyone who wants to use AI to level up everything you're doing. Whether your focus is to recruit or retain, the summit offers a platform to learn, network, and bring back actionable insights to enhance your student engagement strategies. I hope you'll join me and some of your favorite Enrollify creators in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, like Jamie Hunt, Dustin Ramsdell, and Allison Tercio. Use the discount code Enrollify50, and you can register for just $99. So join us at the Engage Summit this June. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there. Yeah, I have so many thoughts on this topic. To quote Melina Palmer, the truth about pricing is that it isn't about price. It's about everything that happens beforehand that matters. And there are two types of brands. There's quality brands and there's value brands. Harvard, Yale, you name it, elite brand name institution, right? Those are quality brands. Value brands in higher ed, maybe your SUNY institutions or community colleges, right? That doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's just two different types of categories for thinking about a brand. In the business world, your strategy for how you set and determine price, you need to know which camp you fall into. And then there's some pretty clear strategies that kind of stem from there. And where the confusion happens is when a value brand is taking on quality brand strategies or vice versa. And it's the vice versa that I think is happening. I think we have a lot of quality brands that are taking on value brand strategies, namely discounting. If you're a quality brand, you actually should not be discounting. Like that dilutes your brand's perception and value and creates unrealistic expectations. Now, I get it. Parents like to go to their cocktail parties and tell all their friends that little Johnny or Sally got a nice big fat scholarship to whatever institution that they've decided to go to. I understand that there are, psychological things at play here, but as, humans, like the way that we value even just $15 can completely change based off of how we are primed, the framing around it, the relativity around it. I mean, there is so much to unpack here. And I think that we have created this problem for ourselves in higher ed.
Yeah, I think so too. Oh, I think your point is fair that like maybe the reason it's happened and been so prolonged is that the discounting is happening privately, but the pricing is happening publicly. And so people get to go to that cocktail party and talk about the volume of the gift and say, oh, well, the school's $50,000 a year, but they got a $30,000 a year scholarship, which feels pretty significant. What I feel like where I came from out of this conference was it almost lifted that veil a little bit because it said, well, hold on, how much are we all discounting here? And the conversations really ended up being that like, it's pretty significant. And so to me, it just kind of shook me a little bit that I think there's a problem here with discounting. There's a problem here with price. There's a broader conversation about how disproportionately private and particularly private faith-based institutions are impacted by closures. I have not ever said this data publicly, but I'm intending to put it in a future newsletter. But, private faith-based institutions make up 15% of colleges in the US, but they make up nearly 50% of all college closures. And so there is a trend happening here with smaller private institutions that are higher priced. And I do worry discounting might be buying time, but I'm not sure if it's doing anything else, to your point, to actually correct the situation that's happening on campus, from an enrollment and financial perspective. My advice to, I know a lot of folks that listen to this podcast are marketers, some are enrollment folks. My advice to anybody listening to this on the institution side is don't discount conversations about discount rates and make sure that you have a seat at that table. Even myself, from an institution perspective, I have rarely been involved in those conversations when I was at institutions. And I think that it's really important to understand exactly the nuances that are going behind that and looking at that year over year and understanding, are we giving more? Are we giving less? Because what I'm learning is this is one of two, I think, secret trends that are happening that are covering the truth of what's happening. One is discount rates are on the rise, and that's hiding the fact that privates should be shrinking more. And I think that's particularly a concern. And then more broadly, I think there is a subset of private institutions that are decreasing their admission standards to maintain their application and start volume. And so it's oh, well, we're still flat year over year. It's yeah, but you became significantly less selective, which, by the way, I'm an open access individual. I love that. But if you've been positioned on being particularly selective and you just slowly water down that selectivity to maintain your enrollment rates, you're changing, to your point, from a quality to a value institution, and you're not acknowledging that you're sort of shifting those strategies. And so this to me just feels like a very, very big murky trend that kind of is getting a light shined on it, at least for me, that it's been I haven't really stepped back and thought about it. And now I kind of can't get it out of my head ever since being a part of some of these conversations.
Well, I think there's two institutions that we need to keep an eye on. The first is Colby Sawyer College in New Hampshire, and the second is Lasell College in Massachusetts. Both of these institutions went into the 2023-24 academic year actually slashing the sticker price of their tuition so that it was more in line with the real price of what students are paying. So Colby Sawyer went from $46,000 down to $17,500. Lasell went from nearly $60,000 down to just under $40,000. So huge reductions from that sticker price. And it'll be very interesting, right? I don't think we've had enough time pass to fully be able to evaluate whether or not those strategies worked for those schools, but they are two to watch in this conversation because they're the ones who are bucking this trend.
That's a really good call out. I mean, I feel like there's been lots of conversations for me in my past about price elasticity and how much are people willing to pay, and about price reduction. And there's this conversation, well, if we reduce price by X amount, how much will we yield? And you can hire any research firm you want to do that study, but I don't believe any of the results from any of them, truthfully, because we are 4,000 college universities in this country. The reality on price is it's very specific to the actual individual you're trying to recruit, not the general public. And I think getting in front of that true individual is going to be particularly hard. And I think that price is honestly subconscious and subjective, not conscious and objective. So you can survey somebody, but they're going to tell you what they think versus actually watching what someone does. And so I love your call out because following institutions that are making that move, I hope for their sake it works. If I was a betting person, I would say I'm not sure it will. I think they're going to look at their higher cost competitors. And I think, unfortunately, people are going to value the unrealistic discount rates more. But I love that there's institutions that have the courage to buck the trend, to do what at some point will need to be done. And to your point, if nothing else, we should be tracking and following that to see what happens. I know I definitely am now that you've called that out. Like, I love that call out. I'm super, super curious what's going to happen. I hope for their sake that it ends up being a big win.
Crazy idea. What if higher ed pricing shifted to a satisfaction guarantee model?
There's a few models. There's also, there's a really interesting Hope College has a really interesting model as well. There's some institutions that are free, some would be a pay afterwards. Income share agreements was a big trend a couple of years ago with like coding boot camps in particular, though it didn't really work for most folks. In either case, it feels like maybe there's a pricing problem, and maybe that's a bigger elephant that the discount rate trend is just kind of revealing. And I'm with you. Maybe we need some other solutions. It's definitely, I think at some point, something has to change. I'll be curious what actually does.
So we mentioned a little while ago that Notre Dame announced that they're closing. I think that this topic of school closures, but also mergers and acquisitions is one that has just, kind of increased drastically post-pandemic. And it's demographic shifts, declining enrollment, the pandemic itself, right? It's all kind of accelerated this need for institutional consolidation. And it really feels like every day at this point, there is some sort of news article about a closure, merger, or an acquisition within our space. So understanding this topic is so critical right now. And I bet that if you're listening to this episode and you haven't been part of this directly yet, you will be, if you continue in this industry for any amount of time at some point in your career. So I'm excited to share that our next Pulse Check mini series, which kicks off this Thursday, is actually on this very topic. And Seth, I think you're actually going to be a guest on an upcoming episode, right?
I am. See, one thing that not everyone knows about me is I actually have a fair amount of M&A experience in the higher ed space, which back in the day, not a lot of us had, and now it's becoming an increasingly demanded area of kind of previous experience. And so I'm going to be a guest talking all about how do you evaluate, look at mergers and acquisitions. They are not always successful. They're not always the right thing to do, but increasingly marketers are being tasked by their leadership with, hey, we're thinking about doing this thing. I'm going to share all the pitfalls. I'm excited to be a guest and work with Kin, who's going to be the host on that. And just, a lot to talk about. And I'm really excited. It's a topic that I'm passionate about, but one that I've never been able to speak about publicly before. So it'll be a first for me and one thing that I'm really looking forward to.
Yes, Kin Sejpal from the University of Redlands is the host for this mini-series. It's a 5-parter, and she surfaced the idea because she identified that even though there's a lot of information available on M&A and other sectors, that specific strategies and challenges within higher ed really have remained largely unexplored. So that is exactly why we are tackling this. You can look forward to that first episode dropping on Thursday. And as always, you will hear Seth and me back in your earbuds next Monday. Seth, it was a pleasure. They go by so quickly.
They do. It was good seeing you, Mallory. Thanks so much.
Good to see you too. Thanks everyone for listening. And we look forward to picking our 2 maple syrup winners.
Yes.
Can't wait. Find our post. Give us a comment. We'll ship you some syrup. All right, friends. Until next time. The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.